Welcome back to the Gut 360 podcast. Happy Monday if you're listening to this on a Monday when this comes out. I'm your host, Ellie Breacher, a registered nutritionist on a mission to empower you to get back into the driver's seat of your own health. Today, we're talking all about fiber, SIBO, and how to reduce bloating and support your gut health. So put the kettle on, get comfy, or throw on your trainers and head outside for a walk while you listen to this episode. I'm joined today by Karen Preece-Smith, an award-winning registered nutritionist. She combines over a decade of clinical experience with advanced functional medicine training and master NLP coaching to deliver a uniquely high-touch, fully personalized approach. Through her private practice, Karen supports clients experiencing stress, fatigue, digestive issues, and complex multi-layered health concerns. Welcome, Karen, to the Gut 360 podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for welcoming me. Thrilled to be here.
So happy to have you here. Now, I would love to start by chatting about fiber. We hear this word fiber all the time now. I feel like it's finally taken the limelight. And what actually is fiber from a scientific perspective, and how does it function inside our gut?
That's such a good question. Yeah, it is a word that's been sort of brandished about. It's basically, the fiber in our diet it comes from plants mainly, and we get it in different forms. So you probably heard of soluble fiber, we have non-soluble fiber, and basically it's plant source which passes through our body without getting digested. So it means that it sort of bulks the store and it really helps us with nice healthy bowel habits.
Yeah, that's definitely a really important starting point. But fiber, as you know, is so much more than just about our bowel habits and our, what happens when we go to the bathroom. So what are the wider benefits of fiber? Why is fiber so important for our body in terms of our hormones, our blood sugar, cholesterol, even mental health?
Absolutely. Well, fiber produces something called short-chain fatty acids in the large intestine. And that produces an even smaller molecule called N-butyrate. Now, N-butyrate acts like a sort of contraction of the large bowel. We call it a prokinetic. So it actually creates motility and movement through the large bowel. So that's really important. It has a few other functions in the body. So it produces something called vitamin K, which you may take with your vitamin D3 if you take it with K2. And it helps with blood clotting as well. So that's really important for our circulatory system. If we think of hormones in the body, our body can produce something called beta-glucuronidase within our gut, which is a form of sort of like a detox, to be honest. It's a way of detoxifying estrogen, binding it, and removing it from the body. So fiber plays a really important role in a whole detox pathway and excreting excess hormones in the body. If we look at mental health, it's really important we're having regular bowel movements, because we think of all that congestion in the body, that built up detox effect. If it's not being cleared daily or every other day, then we know that we're not actually excreting those toxins. They'll recirculate around our body, and they can cause things like, contribute towards things like mental health conditions, low mood, PMS, depression, a whole variety of things. So it's super important.
So much good stuff in there. Where to begin? I think let's just touch on hormones, which you mentioned. So if we're not getting enough fiber, our hormones can essentially recirculate in our body. Does that mean that fiber is more important for women at certain times of the month? How does that come into play with our cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. So I say for cycling women, so women of sort of from teenage years all the way through to sort of perimenopause, menopause, you're looking at eating fiber within your cycle. So particularly in those, I'd say sort of 3 to 5 days before you start bleeding. That's so important. Lots of women say they feel a bit constipated, a bit bunged up, and they want to start relieving that. And it's important we add in fiber at this point, because if we keep things moving, we're actually going to decrease that circulating estrogen, ready for the progesterone to be released. That's really important for hormonal balance.
Really, really important. And how do we know how much we should actually be getting? I know there is this kind of guideline of 30 grams a day, and I often throw around the fact that, in the UK, we're only getting around half of this. I think the average is about 17 grams a day. But what does a gram of fiber look like? How do we know? And also, should everyone be aiming for the exact same amount, or is there something that gets personalized?
Yeah, it's totally personalized. Just like we've got genes that control the amount of protein that ideally we want in the body, we also have certain genes which determine how well we break down carbohydrates. So if you're someone who breaks down carbohydrates very fast, you may need more fiber, for example, to hang around in the body for longer. And I think it's the form of fibers we have as well, which is really important. So we have something called soluble fiber, which is that kind of sticky fiber, which you might recognize in things like apple puree or chia seeds. And that forms a slightly different, does a slightly different function in the body than, say, your non-soluble fiber. So both are really important. I'd say as long as you are going daily, ideally, so you're having one regular bowel movement a day, we should all be regular. And we have a nice balanced mood, whatever that means for you individually, and you feel a balance within your hormones. So for women, that would be an absence of, say, PMS and regular bleeds. For men, that would be, good level of motivation, testosterone. That's really important.
Really, really important. And fiber is obviously so good for us. So why do so many people struggle to tolerate fiber? Why do so many people say, oh, I can't eat fiber, or I can't eat chickpeas or beans or certain high fiber foods? What's going on there?
I think because our diets have changed so much, even just in the last couple of years. But if we go back 10, 15 years, I think most people now, when I'm looking at them, I'm sure the same for you, if you're looking at someone's food diary, it's really common to see a whole bunch of processed foods. And it doesn't mean their diet's bad. It's things like Weetabix or processed breads or, yogurts in pots for stabilizers. So all of these things in our diet, the more processed the food, typically the more fiber is removed. If you think of people's favorite food, it tends to be sort of white breads, pizzas, white rice, not necessarily brown bread, brown rice, but we've got this additional fiber in. So we're really stripping it out of our diets. So I think that's one of the biggest changes. And if people are following restricted diets for reasons, let's say they've got IBS, they might strip out fiber because they actually feel a bit worse on it. In that case, they're moving more towards a sort of protein-based diet. And that might be fine short term, but longer term can really lead to problems.
Yeah, one thing I see a lot, and in fact, from my own personal experience, when I got diagnosed with Crohn's, I was 8 years old, and I remember speaking to this dietitian in the NHS, and she said to me, you should steer clear of fiber because you won't be able to tolerate fiber. And yeah, that was at the time when I was in the thick of a flare-up and I had inflammation throughout my gut. But now that I'm in remission, I eat so much fiber, and fiber is amazing for our gut health. And in fact, it may even help keep our gut in an even better, healthier state and prevent future flare-ups. So a lot of people who have a history of gut issues have been told by their doctor, dietitian, nutritionist at the time, oh, you can't tolerate fiber, or fiber will trigger your symptoms. They take that to mean that that's permanent, that they can, never eat any kind of fiber again. Or I remember being told kind of peel the skin off apples, peel the skin of the cucumber, because the skin is obviously where there is more fiber. But actually that's the part that's really good for us. So what would you say to these people?
I would say, yeah, obviously, if you're going through a flare up, and I work with a lot of clients with IBD as well, so things like diverticulitis or Crohn's or celiac, and there's different rules for those people. But if you're a sort of no known health condition and you're getting a flare up, think about, it's usually not the meal that you just ate, it's often the one before. So if you had, plain piece of bread, so obviously it's not always that piece of bread, it's the thing you ate before that. So it could be that particular time you were very stressed and you were perhaps walking, so you weren't sitting down to eat your meal. All of these things have a big part to play. So mindful eating, chewing our food, staying relaxed, supporting our nervous system. And so it's also the environment as well as the actual food that we're eating, of how it responds in the body.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is such an important point. It's about not just what we eat, but how we eat too. We know we should be consuming fermented foods for our gut health, but have you tried kimchi or sauerkraut? This episode is sponsored by The Cultured Collective, whose kimchi and sauerkraut are naturally fermented, unpasteurized, and tested for live cultures, as well as being a source of fiber. They've won awards for their flavor, so I'm not the only one who thinks they taste amazing. It's really easy to add a scoop of these real live foods to all kinds of meals. I love adding kimchi to the side of my eggs and topping avocado toast with sauerkraut. They're offering listeners of the Gut 360 podcast a huge 50% off their kimchi and sauerkraut, so head to the show notes to find out more. Now, would you say that bloating from fiber or symptoms as a result of fiber are always a bad sign, or can we sometimes expect to get a little bit bloated after a very fiber-rich meal?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of bloating is normal for you. So you want a tiny bit of distension that will then pass on its own within about an hour or two. But the clients that I support in clinic tend to, be looking 6 to 9 months pregnant after eating a regular meal. And if that's happening, it's often an outward symptom that some other imbalance is happening within the body.
Definitely. So let's say someone isn't experiencing any severe gut symptoms, but does want to increase their fiber intake. What would you say is a kind of step-by-step guide of how they can strategically increase their fiber without triggering too much bloating or other gastro symptoms?
Great question. So I'd say low and slow. And I often say, like, if there's a vegetable that you love, so lots of the people I work with love carrots, for example, it comes in loads of different colors. So you can get red carrots, white carrots, green if they do them, and eat that one vegetable but in as many varieties of colors as you can, because that increases the diversity and the different types of fiber that you would receive.
And why is that diversity so important to get through our diet?
Yeah, because they all do slightly different things in the body. So even if we come back to short chain fatty acids, there's sort of 5 known ones, which different foods will contain higher amounts of certain types. Your body might not tolerate one type very well, but might tolerate a different type of fiber. So it's finding the one that's right for you. I think lots of people these days outsource that into pills and powders and supplements, which I'm guilty of as well. But it's quite easy to become a bit stuck in the one type if you're doing it that way alone.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's a really important point. I would love to move on to ask you about something that I see more than ever now. I feel like it's become much more talked about. So for anyone who's heard of this term but isn't fully clear, what exactly is SIBO and how is it different from general IBS?
Yeah, so SIBO is kind of a symptom, really. It stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So your small intestine is kind of at the top of the digestive tract. So if you think about where the pain is, often people say it's an upper part of their stomach bloating or upper part of their gut. They might have a pain in their rib cage, which is actually referred pain from the liver. And they might have sort of just feel really sluggish. It tends to be bloating more frequently than your sort of classic IBS symptoms. So it can be associated with sort of nausea, cramping, diarrhea, constipation, but it tends to be more bloating is the main symptom.
Okay, and what causes this bacteria to overgrow in the small intestine in the first place?
That is such a great question. So it comes down to the individual pathway for people, but some common ones are, we've got this little valve which links the small intestine to the large intestine called the ileocecal valve, so ICV. And if that becomes a bit leaky, you think of 2 pipes being joined together, bacteria can spurt around there and it can re-enter the small intestine. So that's a common one. Other ones are if you've had a bout of antibiotics, maybe you had thrush, maybe you got some food poisoning and you've taken antibiotics, as you should do in these situations, and it's wiped out all the bacteria and then it becomes a bit displaced. If we're looking at wider things in the body, it can link back to things like gastritis, H. pylori, or even something like the thyroid gland. If it's not functioning correctly, it affects movement through the bowel, and that can actually be one of the root causes of SIBO. So it's about kind of digging down into those details with the person in front of you and finding out what their individual triggers are.
Yeah, it really is so key to get to that root cause. And then coming back to fiber, but tying it in here with SIBO, why do so many people with SIBO struggle with fiber? And does that mean that people with SIBO should kind of eliminate fiber altogether, or how would you go about that?
It's really tricky because we know fiber is great for long-term gut health. And by the point lots of people see me, often they're on quite restricted diets. So the worst I've ever seen across the years was someone that was just eating fish and white rice, and they've been on this diet for a year.
Wow.
I was like, no fiber, nothing. They were just so bored.
No fun.
No fun whatsoever. So basically, once you get this bacteria in the small intestine, it shouldn't be there. So it forms this protective barrier, a bit like a shield. It's called a biofilm. And these are natural. We get them if we catch a cold or a virus as well. But that means that that bacteria stays put. Once that bacteria is there, it grows when we eat sugar. So we could be having a piece of bread and we might have always been fine with gluten, and then suddenly it's feeding that bacteria and we're becoming bloated. So we work that into the main sugars are known as the FODMAPs. They stand for sort of fructose, oligosaccharides, disaccharides, etc. And they're all different forms of sugar. The agave syrup is the same as table sugar in terms of how it responds in the body. One might be more beneficial and more nutrient rich. but it's still going to feed that bacteria. So it feeds the hydrogen and it feeds the methane, and it just causes it to swell so that it creates a lot of gas as a byproduct and you become more bloated. So the tricky thing you've got is if you continue to eat these foods whilst removing that bacteria, whether you're doing that via herbs or antibiotics, you're going to keep feeling bloated at the same time. So the way I do it, and everyone's different, is that I say, right, we want to limit these foods as much as possible. So you could pick any diet you like, really. You could go on a low fiber diet, you could go on a specific carbohydrate diet, you could go on a low FODMAP diet, low histamine diet, something that limits the sugars. And then I say once a day, think of it like fishing, like on a fishing rod. You want to put some bait on to catch your fish. So you want to introduce a little bit of sugar strategically so that the agent you're using to kill off the bacteria has something to work upon. So that's very strict advice, and that's for kind of 6 to 8 weeks typically. I don't like people continuing on the low FODMAP diet for much longer than that because, like I said, you can then get nutrient deficiencies, you run really low on fiber, and we know that then has this knock-on effect on long-term health of the bowel.
A lot of people I see in clinic come to me thinking they have IBS due to ongoing and unpredictable digestive symptoms. But in many, the root issue turns out to be small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. Recently, I've been recommending the SIBO Complex Plus by Ultravita, who is sponsoring this episode. It's a targeted herbal supplement containing a blend of 9 botanical extracts, including oregano, berberine, thyme, and ginger. Ingredients that are well researched for their antimicrobial properties. Ultravita's medical and nutrition team formulated this supplement using their extensive expertise and unique approach to digestive health as part of a 2-step SIBO protocol, which tackles the overgrowth and then replenishes your good bacteria and supports microbiome balance. As a valued listener of the Gut 360 podcast, you can get 20% off your first order by using the code GUT360 at checkout at ultravita.com. T's and C's apply. Yeah, I think that's a really good approach. And honestly, the amount of clients who've come to me and they've said, where I've been following a low FODMAP diet for 6 years, and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
You should not have been doing that. So yeah, a lot of people do these things permanently, which is crazy. And so once the SIBO has been treated, how can fiber then be kind of reintroduced to rebuild a resilient and a diverse gut microbiome and prevent relapse of SIBO?
Yeah, so you want to be really careful at that stage. So once you've got rid of the SIBO, and we can check this as practitioners using something called a breath test or a stool test if you want to, either one works. And if we're using a breath test, we want levels to be below 20 part per million for hydrogen and below 3 part per million or 12 if you're constipated for methane. So assume you get that nice low level on the test, the next stage would be to add in a very specific probiotics, one that's not going to sort of suddenly introduce all this bacteria to the gut. Have a nice prokinetic in there, so something that creates movement, even something simple like ginger tea can be really good at this point, and then gradually increase your fibers. So you can do it in a really strategic way. So you could introduce one of the FODMAPs in a small dose every few days and be very regimented with it. Or you can just introduce the foods that you're missing to the point of your intolerance and take it from there.
Amazing. And here on the Gut 360 podcast, we always like to take a 360-degree approach to gut health. And so if you had a client with SIBO, I would love to know what advice you'd give them beyond what's on their plate. So kind of any lifestyle factors that you would go through with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we've got dysfunction in the gut, it really affects more than just our digestive health. You know, if we're feeling bloated, we don't want to go out and meet our friends or go on a date or give a presentation at work. It can really knock our confidence. So I'd say work on that inner confidence and feeling calm. So whenever we feel stressed, and it could be that suddenly our jeans are too tight because we've eaten a high FODMAP meal or something like this, we trigger the stress response in the body. And it's similar and if our body was actually being attacked by a tiger. So we get increased heart rate, we get something called vasodilation, which means that our blood is thinning, that we feel that sense of panic, we want to run away, our digestion shuts down, and our hormones shut down as well. So we want to kind of trick our body in that moment that we're not actually being attacked by a tiger. So simple things like deep breathing. I love doing vagal nerve stimulation. So I use a device on my chest, which there's lots we can link in the notes, that actually stimulates the vagal nerve. I'm aware of this device every day for 10 minutes. If you don't have a device, you can hum, you can sing, you can gargle water, you can wear like a nice high-necked top, or even a little tapping of your chest. So that can be really good. I also like gratitude journaling and even sort of creative things, particularly for women if they've got children or they're sort of approaching perimenopause. It's a stage of life where you're really, really busy and you don't have a lot of time. And often it's your time as a woman that goes, so that creative time. So things like oil painting or tap dancing. So just restarter, which is really fun.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, there's something that kind of makes you feel creative and fun in yourself. And that's really good for that nervous system flow state regulation.
Amazing. So many brilliant tools and tips and strategies there. This episode is sponsored by IM8. I used to catch every cough and cold going, but since taking IM8 Daily Essentials, I've noticed a real difference in how resilient my immune system feels. It combines key immune nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin D paired with vitamin K2 for better absorption, zinc with probiotics, prebiotics, and postbiotics to help nourish a healthy gut microbiome, as well as a powerful blend of greens and antioxidants to help protect your cells from everyday stress. It's also not pixie dust levels and actually has an impressive dose for everything mentioned. Use the code GUT360 for a special discount and free welcome kit on your first order. Thank you, Karen. We finish each guest episode with a quick fire round. So are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, what is something that seems healthy but often backfires for your health?
Oh, I would say things like agave syrup. So agave syrup, date syrup, or making your own healthy treats. Often when I actually calculate the calories of those, they're higher than if I just bought it from the shop.
It can be deceiving. As much as I love making my own healthy treats and I really do enjoy it, I don't kid myself and pretend that I'm eating a salad because I'm not.
Yeah, sadly.
What's one healthy habit that people can start implementing today?
I would say go for a 10-minute walk after your lunch. So not immediately afterwards, but within 10 minutes. It's really good for nervous system regulation, particularly if you live somewhere where you're not in the center of town and you've got some plants around you. Those fractal shapes that we see in plants, they stimulate the GABA receptors in our brain, which is all about relaxation, rest, and digest.
That's incredible. I love an after meal walk any time of day, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. What's your favorite gut-friendly food?
I really like kefir or kombucha. So I'd probably pick kombucha. I don't drink alcohol, so I like having it in the evening in a really fancy glass with ice and making it like a special sort of evening drink. And it's really good for our gut health.
I love kombucha too. What's your go-to breakfast on busy days?
Busy days, I'm all about overnight oats. So I prepare something the night before, either chia pudding, overnight oats, throw some blueberries on it, some almond butter, and I'm good to go.
Sounds delicious. Yum. What's one nutrition myth or wellness trend that you wish would disappear?
So many. They're controversial because I've actually written about these. I'm going to say CGMs. So they're continuous blood glucose monitors. You wear them on your arm. I've worn them for at least 3 months at a time, but I changed my opinion on this when my niece was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 7 last year. And I see how if you have to wear these devices, it's very different through wearing it for fun. And whilst you do get some good data, and I still use them occasionally with clients, I now have a new understanding of what it's like to wear it for illness. And it's kind of shifted my mindset on that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think a lot of people feel the pressure to just jump on every wellness trend they see on Instagram, and we absolutely don't need to be wearing these devices all the time. So interesting one. What's one healthy habit that you're still working on?
It's coffee for me. So I absolutely love coffee. I've been drinking one throughout the podcast. I do have oat milk in it, which again isn't probably the best choice in terms of blood sugar balance. I do love coffee. I've tested my genes. I'm a fast metabolizer of it. So it's probably my biggest sort of health habit, which isn't aligned with longer term goals. And that's what I'm working.
Interesting, because I feel like coffee is such a hot topic right now. And, we have all these people say coffee is actually really good for our gut microbes. So coffee can, it's full of polyphenols, obviously in moderation. We don't want it disrupting our sleep, of course. We'll finish this round with a few fun ones. So the first is actually coffee or matcha.
Oh, it's got to be coffee. Yeah, I do like matcha, but coffee.
Okay, nice. What's your coffee order?
Oat milk flat white.
Favorite coffee shop?
So I've got some lovely ones near me, but as you're London based, I'm going to shout out Caffeine on Great Titchfield Street.
With a K.
London with a K.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I love
So nice.
in there as well. Such a nice guy.
Really, really nice. I love that one. I used to go there when I was studying my nutrition degree. It was right in that area in Fitzrovia. It was my go-to between lectures. And overnight oats or eggs on toast?
Oh, both are so good. I'm going to say overnight oats, but if I'm staying in a hotel, it's always eggs on toast.
I love a hotel breakfast. If you could only do one type of exercise for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, this is tricky because I'm actually an ex-yoga teacher. So
I did know that.
Yeah, so I taught hot yoga for 15 years. I don't actually do that much yoga these days. So it'd be a cross between either Reformer Pilates, which I love.
Me too.
Peloton. And I do Peloton most days. So maybe Peloton at the moment.
Nice. Okay. And lastly, what is one word you associate with a healthy gut?
Diverse. So diversity. So I think it's important to, whilst we don't want to have an imbalance, and that's often when we get these bloating and these symptoms, things like SIBO, as we've been discussing, you do want to have good diversity of the bacteria within your gut and within your diet and your day as well. So I go with diversity.
Really, really important. Thank you so much, Karen, for being a guest on the Gut 360 podcast. If people want to find out more about what you do, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so you can check me out on Instagram. I'm at Karen Preece-Smith _nutritionist, or my website, which is karenpreesmith.com.
Amazing. Thank you, Karen, for your time. And thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Gut 360 podcast. If you learned something new today, I would love you to send this to at least 2 people who would find it interesting. And of course, make sure you hit follow for weekly episodes every Monday morning. And please take 10 seconds to leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening, just to allow this podcast to reach more people so that we can help more people transform their health. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week, and I'll be back in your ears next Monday.